this is more about ancestors and how we identify that they are ancestors and not something else. So the thing with ancestors is that they have a more real impression. What I mean by that is that when I talked about guides, I was explaining that a guide had a physical life before, but they crossed over. They're very much a spiritual being now, and they're very much tied to the spiritual world. They do have some relation that you can identify them with just to make you feel more comfortable. But then when it comes to ancestors have a lot more connection to the physical world. So you would feel that they are more connected to the physical world. They have a more real kind of aspect to them. So they have a more real impression to them. They would dress like they would earlier. They would look similar to what they did in real life. They communicate differently. They have sometimes a little bit more difficulty communicating, but they try and communicate almost like they did when they were physical. So you would see that sometimes they would try and communicate, but they would get stuck and they wouldn't know how to communicate. And then the other thing is that they would turn up in a different area to guides. Quite a while ago, and in the first course, we did have a look at mapping out a reading to say, well, where would you find different things? And then what I was saying is that for me, ancestors would always turn up on the left shoulder for the sitter. So when I look at the sitter, if somebody appears on their left shoulder, that I would know it's an ancestor. We will go further on and then explain how we then identify where they are. Then it doesn't really go about where they show up in just the general reading, but then we want them to position themselves in relation to the sitter so that we can establish, well, what is the relation of the ancestor to the sitter, just so we can say, well, this is your father has shown up and they have this message for you. This just to indicate that the ancestor does have more of a connection to the physical, and that the way that we communicate or the way that they come up or pop up in the person's life, that leaves a different impression. So we really pick up how the ancestors come up and what impression they leave. Also, we had this before with the guides, and we have that you can get an impression of yourself based on where you can communicate with yourself. And then this is very much about you in the reading. So in the reading, you can identify yourself. When you have a communication from a spirit, you can then pick it up in a different area. And when you have a communication with an ancestor, this could even be a different area from that. You could have a couple of guides, and when you communicate to them, they could all show up in different areas. So the trick to this is really to get the impression, to feel where they communicate from, and then connect that to who is this message from. Okay, every time I get a message from this place where I feel now, I really know it's an ancestor. When I really get this message now, I know it's this guide specifically. And then you know who's giving the message, and you can also start to get to know your guides and know, well, this is something they would typically say or do, and you would understand much better where they come from, and make it a lot easier for you to then give the information through to the sitter. Of course, to remember is that we really do these readings for other people, not for ourselves. And for that reason, whatever we get, any impression or anything that we get up, is really for assisting someone else and bringing the message to them. We just act as the conduit for it.